Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. For more than 100 years, East Tennesseans have been turning to A.G. Hines Company for their building supplies and their tools. That's for everything from complete home building to simple do-it-yourself projects around your house. Gordon Hines and his kids, the fourth generation at A.G. Hines Company, can get you exactly what you need when you drop by and see them on Hines Street in downtown Knoxville. You can also visit them, aghines.com. You can call them on that number right there. They've been doing it for 100 years. I promise you, they'll take as good a care of you as they did, as their granddad took care of your granddad. That's how long they've been doing it at A.G. Hines Company. All right, going into yesterday's action, Tennessee was ranked number 11 in the NCAA's net rankings. That's pretty good. There's been a lot of grumbling, a lot of disappointment over a team that's top 11 in the NCAA's own computers. But we expected this team to be better than it has been. Fans obviously expected it to be better than it has been. Part of that, I think, is because of style of play. And I've heard a lot of people complain about, it's just not fun to watch. Let me show you some numbers that I cooked up yesterday. In the last 2 years of the Admiral Schofield Grant Williams regime, Barnes' two best years at UT, Tennessee averaged 75.2 points per game in regulation, that's not overtime, in regulation versus SEC foes. Plotted against all other teams in all of the games this year, that would rank 98. So you're top 100 in scoring those 2 years, and that was over 42 SEC games. In the 2.5 years after Schofield and Grant Williams, that's 45 SEC games, you've averaged 68.2 points per game, just 66.2 this year. Well, here's the thing, 68.2, 70, it's 7 points a game. What's the deal? That would drop you to 261st in the country in scoring. I think that's a big reason for some of the grumbling. Nobody likes to lose, but if you were losing 85-80 instead of 65-60, I think there would be less grumbling. So I think that the lack of offense, the disappearing of the offense has hurt the way people are looking at Rick Barnes and his team. But also, let's take a look at his years at UT. You could argue the first 4 years he's building. All right, doesn't make the tournament, and they're under 500. Gets to 500, doesn't make the tournament. Better in the SEC, though. Next year, you got a good team. You have an injury that cost you the game against Loyola Chicago. You lose by a point. The next year, you have a great team. Great team, losing overtime in the Sweet 16. Then you don't have the tournament due to COVID, but you take a step back. You lose your two great guys. Last year was supposed to be better. You have a bad bounce at the end of the first round of the NCAA tournament. Bad way to go out. This year, not what everybody's expecting record-wise, but again, you're now going to be top 10. My question for you guys, is this program moving forward? Do you feel it's moving forward? And that can change quickly, I know that. But do you feel it's moving forward right now? Because I think before yesterday, you'd had a lot of people saying it's going in reverse. I think at worst, it's neutral. But is it going forward? And I'm not talking about this year's team. I'm talking about the program since he's taken it over. Those first 4 years, I felt you're going forward. I don't know that I feel that right now. Thoughts? Anyone?
It feels a lot like you're in a Prius where it's silent and you take your foot off the brake and it's like kind of drifting forward. Because ultimately, like, you're bringing in a lot more talent. Tennessee has never had this much talent. And that's the biggest thing you can do. College sports is a talent acquisition business. More so in football, but somewhat in basketball. But the biggest thing is all those years that you looked at, did Tennessee hit their ceiling of how good they could be? More often than not, I would say probably not. And that is where a lot of the frustration comes from, and that has not really changed. The talent level has changed. So now you've got that sort of engine where you can rev up and be better, but you got to hit that ceiling.
And you'd have people out there who would scream that you had Ernie and Bernie, you did have great talent in the past. But what you're saying, I agree with in terms of consistently every year. Now you're in the market. You're battling Kentucky and Duke for 4 and 5 stars every year. Tennessee's never been at that point where you're bringing in the talent that they're bringing in consistently. Mark, is this program moving forward? Is it kind of in neutral? Did it get to a point, where you are recruiting like this to where there's no more forward to go? What's your view on this program?
Yeah, I will go back and forth on it because, one, when you look at where you started as far as NCAA issues, bouncing around from Pearl to Konzo to Tyndall, you've now got consistency. You look at some of these other teams like Georgia and Vanderbilt and Ole Miss and some of these other schools that are just
lost in the wilderness.
So much progress. The talent that you're bringing in, you are winning. But the other thing that led me more towards neutral is, Rick Barnes will be 68 next year. And Rick Barnes is a Hall of Fame coach. and how much longer is he going to go? And then we'll talk about it later. You know, the way that college basketball and college athletics has changed, immediate transfer eligibility, NILs. You know, you're getting these players, and if it's great, one and dones, that's a different dynamic for a coach Barr, any coach staff to coach, than the guys that, you know, are with your program for 3 or 4 years. That's a complete. And then if you don't play them, they can now transfer and be eligible right away. And so I think the talent thing is a big deal. We're getting talent, but now what are we going to do with it? And that's why I still remain neutral, because as we said last week, I don't feel as though our pieces are playing together and putting out a better product as a team than the ultimate pieces are. And that's what ultimately a coach should be doing.
Yeah, and for some reason, I don't have a warm and fuzzy feeling that Rick Barnes is a one-and-done type coach. I think he's more of the players that develop within the system and work hard and meet the expectations he sets out. I wrote down, I think you're treading water. And one reason I think that is your record away from home, not just road games, but neutral site games. Until you start winning more of those games instead of taking your lumps, I think that and you pointed out last week, John, right around 500 in SEC play. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it all points to that. And the last thing, the SEC's gotten better. Tennessee may be playing pretty good, but your competition has really stepped up too.
Well, it also doesn't help the view of this program that Auburn and Bruce Pearl is going to be number one this week. He took Tennessee to the first number one ranking here. He's taken Auburn to their first number one ranking there. Nobody compares Tennessee and Barnes to Pearl when Pearl is in yet another year of NCAA jail. They're banned from the tournament, or they're not in the tournament. Nobody pays attention. But when they're number one, that is bad news for whoever's coaching the Vols, and that happens to be Rick Barnes.
Well, and don't hear neutral as a bad thing necessarily, because look,
it's not reverse,
right? Well, no, but also, you know, they're consistently good. Yep. And, you know, Kentucky's, all the 5 stars that they have, and they're not always making Final Four runs.
They're
right?
in neutral.
I mean, you look at North Carolina, one of the best of all time, missed the NCAA tournament. So you've got all these programs that are really, really good that are still like this. And we, like we were talking about off air, we watch Tennessee basketball all the time, and that is all we see. And we forget about what some of these other programs are dealing with. And so it's okay to be neutral, and neutral still be doggone good. You're just not continuing to make the climb.
Now,
that's okay.
Some of those programs, like at Kentucky, I would argue they're in neutral. I don't know that the one-and-done thing is really working for John Calipari. I mean, they're good, but they've hit a level to where they're the kings. They're in that group that's the kings of college basketball. Tennessee isn't there yet, so there's still room to put this thing back and forward, I think. But still, you're right. I don't think it's going in reverse.
Well,
you're just kind of idling.
The other thing is expectations, right? We expect people to be good. Heupel, well, I don't know what their record was, but everyone's all excited about Heupel. You go 7-6 next year. Now you have higher expectations. Yeah. People are, jumping off the bridge. It's about expectations.
Vince didn't jump in, so you're getting the short change here. Sure. Are they neutral, reverse, forward?
I'd say a wavy neutral. A rocky water neutral, where you're going to have the ups and you're going to have the downs. Look, from the starting point, it's a big time forward from where they were.
Yep.
They peaked, and then it come down a little bit. Got to cash in the postseason, but the talent is a big factor why I would give them a positive in that area.
And that's a huge chunk of it. If you mentioned it to start the segment. If he had better tournament runs, if you don't lose Kyle Alexander – and you get past Loyola Chicago, and I think if you had Alexander, you don't lose by 1 to them, you may be the one that went to the Final Four, as Loyola Chicago did that year. We're looking at this from a totally different light if Rick Barnes has Tennessee's first Final Four banner hanging in the rafters, but he doesn't. So I think that's part of it. That's a big part of it.
But even then, for some fans that went to the Final Four, they'd be even more upset with what's going on right now because they went to a Final Four.
There were people that called in the radio shows. It was classic. Tennessee wins the national championship in Tempe in 1998, and the next day there are phone calls about where recruiting doesn't look good.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's a professional troll who made that call that everyone would know if I said his name, but you've still got those folks.
Yeah.
All right, we good, or do you want to throw in one more thing?
I was just going to say the profile, if you talk to people from the outside, maybe basketball analysts, things like that, I think they would look more positively in the direction of Tennessee basketball more than neutral.
What do they know? Okay. When we come back, let's get back on track because we are now 45 minutes over. The show won't end until 2 o'clock. Tennessee's got Florida this week. They've got Texas. Will Rick Barnes show any emotion this week? Could it play an impact in the game? We'll discuss that. Come on back on the Sports Source.